Good evening. We're streaming live from the KHOU newsroom. My name is Bill Prasad. I'm a licensed professional counselor and I'm Channel 11's mental health and wellness expert. In the last couple of days, we've seen some horrendous mass shootings, and there are a lot of questions that people have about the shooters and reactions of the victims. So let's start first with who is the mass shooter. The FBI has released a lot of research taking a look at this person and their demographics. 94% of these shooters are men. About 60% of them are Caucasian men. 87% are single, divorced, or separated. And 56%, more than half, showed signs, disturbing signs, that they may act out violently as many as 2 years before the attack. So there are telltale warning signs. Unfortunately, there is no checklist. There is no single piece of behavior. There is no algorithm that we can go to that will say this person is definitely has the potential for an active shooter. A number of people at home may be wondering also, how do we talk to children about what they are seeing on television? Given the number of screens they're exposed to, more than likely they have seen something that is connected to the two mass shootings. So, if the children are very young, you want to get a sense of what's happening at their school in reference to any types of drills, any types of mass shooter drills. And you can easily ascertain that information by calling the school, perhaps talking to the school counselor or school psychologist. As a parent, you want to get a sense of what they are learning in school, and you want to enforce in them that they should follow the directions of the school teachers or school security. To tell the littles that the teachers and school security personnel are there to keep them safe. If they have questions at home, one of the things that you want to review with the little kids are that they are safe at home, that mom and dad are there if they have any questions or any concerns. A way that you can tell if a child has absorbed a lot of some of this information and perhaps it's playing out in their imaginations is pay attention to how children play. That will tell you a lot about what they are thinking. For example, if their play gears towards something that might look similar to some type of shooting, what you can do is intervene and say, what if mommy was there? What if daddy? What if a teacher was there and took you away to safety? If a child has nightmares, and sometimes this occurs, about a mass shooting or a shooter in the school, then have them play act the nightmare for you. And once again, you intervene on the play by saying, what if mommy or daddy was there to help you out? What if mommy or a school teacher was there in order to get you out of the school safely? For the older kids, your interactions have to be more reality-based. Many kids see many screens throughout the day. You really can't shield them from information, especially on a story like these, where there will be continuing information that will be going on over the next days, over perhaps the next few weeks, as we see the one shooter appear in court and we see the investigation continue. If you're talking to a high school student, once again, you want to get a sense of what types of drills are going on in the high schools. There is no way you can assure to 100% safety that their school will never be invaded by a mass shooter, but you can reinforce that if they follow the instructions, if they do as they're told, it could be a positive outcome. So a question might be, if you're a family member or a friend, how does one intervene? So once again, in many cases, the potential shooter.
All right, we are going to go live right now talking about some of the heartbreaking images we've seen coming out of El Paso. A lot of parents outside the Walmart comforting their children. They witnessed it or they were nearby when this tragedy was happening and unfolding. So our mental health expert is here, Bill Prasad. He's joining us now. I mean, here we go again, Bill. This is just another mass shooting that we have to explain to our kids. How do we go about doing that as parents?
For the small children, you have to get a sense of what's happening in their schools in reference to drills. What do they do if there's an active shooter alert in the school? Once you have a sense of that, you have to remind the littles that at home they are safe, that mommy and daddy are there for them. Taking a look at how they play may give you a sense of what they're thinking. Sometimes playtime will reveal a lot about a child. If a child has nightmares, what you want to do is have them play out their nightmare, but then say, what if mommy or daddy was there to help you? What if a teacher was there?
President Trump spoke earlier today for the first time about these shootings. He made a comment about the culture of violence in our country. Let's take a listen to that. All right, we're going to get to that in just a moment, but we're going to check in with you. You were staying here for the hour,
Yes.
answering our questions on air and online, so we're going to send it back to Russ.
So continuing to explore the pre-attack profile, we know that 62% of the active shooters acted in abusive manner. 35% had a prior criminal conviction. 16% were involved in some type of intimate partner violence, and 11% had been involved in some type of stalking in their past. But in many situations, the mass shooter has no criminal record. Once again, there is not one identifying characteristic, not one single act that will tell you that this person has a potential to be a mass shooter. As far as taking a look further at the pre-attack profile, the mass shooter at times has work performance difficulties, perhaps clashes with their peers, or they're having difficulty at school. Maybe they're having a clash with their peers in school, maybe they're getting poor grades. Also at times, the mass shooter shows evidence of suicidal ideation. So what is suicidal ideation? It can be thinking about a way that you would kill yourself. Now, you take that seriously if the person has a means and has a plan. In other words, if a person is threatening to kill themselves and they have perhaps benzodiazepines, Xanax, and they have alcohol, they have a plan, they have the means, so that should be taken seriously. If the person has been threatening, has a problem with anger, or has had confrontations with a number of people in the past, that might show a propensity toward being part of the profile of a mass shooter. Also, some of these mass shooters have personal or political grievances, meaning they have been wronged in some way and they have magical thinking surrounding violence. Sometimes their sense is that if they commit a violent act, then magically they or their group will get what they want. Also, there's something called leakage. Now, this is an FBI term that essentially says they have talked about some kind of a plan with others. In many cases, those others are friends or family members who at times should take a look at how the person is acting, and if there is leakage, then that person should be compelled to tell someone, and that someone should probably be the authorities. In many cases, though, because a loved one finds out or a friend, that person does not want the potential shooter to get in trouble. So sometimes that person is reluctant to say anything.
Bill, we have a viewer named Ron, and if you want to address Ron here, he says that I can certainly identify with this, he's feeling tired. And I know that this isn't necessarily a question, but what advice do you have for people who are just feeling that overwhelming sense of just feeling tired of this, tired of everything?
There is probably at times an overwhelming sense of helplessness or hopelessness. You could probably call it mass shooter fatigue, that we have seen this again and again. The idea that you're getting tired, you're getting fatigued, might be an indicator that you might be spending too much time in front of the television. So backing away from something like this, but not forgetting that we are in this together, that all of us have a responsibility to perhaps say something or do something.
Okay, wonderful. And they can't hear me, so if you want to repeat
Okay,
the question
sure.
or whatever. A viewer named Jack asked if you can comment on the common thread of doctor-authorized prescription medication found in a majority of mass shootings.
So the question is, what about doctor-prescribed medication, and how often do those things show up and perhaps in possession of a mass shooter? So doctors prescribe a number of medications, and in many cases the psychiatric challenge they are trying to treat is not an indicator of violence, such as a large number of people in our society suffer from anxiety. There might be medication for that. A large number of people suffer from depression. There could be medication for that. Those alone are not indicators of a propensity to do violence. The FBI had done a study where it said that only 1 out of every 4 active shooters had been diagnosed with a mental health problem and had been perhaps hospitalized at a psychiatric hospital. So just the appearance of psychotropic medication is not a clearly defined path toward this person could become a mass shooter. The question could also be, where do mass shooters get their weapons? The latest FBI statistics say about 40% buy the items legally. Another 35% already have possessed the weapon. Keep in mind that only 13 U.S. states have red flag laws that allow police to take legal weapons from people who are determined to be threats to themselves or others. So questions surrounding how did these people get their weapons? A large number either already possess the weapons or they bought the weapons.
Which one is the TV camera? Is it this one?
On your right.
That's not the Facebook Live camera? Okay.
The FBI took a look at some of the mental health pressures or stressors that some of these mass shooters have had to deal with. The categories are financial stress, employment problems, conflicts with friends, peers, marital problems. So if you take a look at that list, you suddenly discover that a large number of people, many people, have had financial difficulties.
All right, welcome back to the 411. We've been talking about these images coming out of El Paso, talking about parents comforting their children after this horror that happened at a Walmart there, and parents now having to explain all of this. I'm joined again by mental health expert Bill Prasad, and we talked a little earlier about some of the comments that the president made this morning following the shooting. Again, talking about a culture of violence in our country. Let's go ahead and take a listen to that bite. So this really isn't the first time that video games are being blamed for violence or inciting violence. What is your response to that?
I think it's a bit of a deflection. The percentage of people who are mass shooters who looked at violent media comes out to about 19%, and there's the statistic right there. So that is not a catch-all problem for these mass shooters. I think that claiming that violent media is to blame diverts attention from what might be the real issues.
Because it looks like on these graphs that you're showing us that the other issues are poor work performance, poor school performance, anger. These are all much bigger indicators that there might be some suggest violence by an individual, correct?
Absolutely. All of those factors may give you some hints, but once again, if you take a look at poor school performance. How many people do you know that at times had trouble in school? That's a lot of people.
Yeah.
How many people can say they've never had a run-in with anyone at work? Right? That's a lot of people. So it's very difficult to develop a profile. Some of these folks are loners, some of them aren't. So there is no single list, there's no single act, there's no algorithm that you can look at and say, okay, this person is definitely a mass shooter. That's what makes it so difficult.
Absolutely. All right, Bill Prasad's going to be here, of course, for the rest of the hour. He is answering your questions online on our Facebook Live as well, so you can send your questions there to our KHOU Facebook page. Russ?
We have a question from George about suicide rates. Are they up? And goes to a larger conversation we've been having in the newsroom about deaths of despair, and those rates are going up as well.
Suicide rates have been climbing over the last 5 to 10 years. Most of the age groups that are climbing are white males in their teens and then males in their 40s and 50s, but we've also seen an increase in suicides in the African American community. We've also seen an increase of suicides among women. A number of these mass shooters do take their own lives, and then one has to wonder if they are doing what is known as suicide by cop, in that they are putting themselves in positions where police officers have no choice but to fatally shoot them.
Can you talk a little bit about Chantel? It references hate killings, and can you talk a little bit about perhaps what could drive someone to commit that kind of act of violence?
Well, Chantel, that's a good question, and we're talking about hate crimes and hate and what would be the provoking thing or things that might drive someone toward a hate group. One of the things is the culture they grew up in, how were they parented, and also at times there is a profile developing of what we call a disconnected or disenfranchised white male. The overwhelming number of shootings are committed by men. A very large number of those shootings are committed by white men who somehow at times feel disconnected, that they're looking for something, and at times they gravitate toward the dark corners of the internet, and they find people who are in their basements who connect with them on some really fringe topics and potentially violent topics. So the need to belong at times drives these people to get connected to fringe groups and get connected to hate.
Yeah, and another viewer, George, is making a comment about loners, and I think that goes in a little bit with what you were talking about. And what are some so a lot of times I understand that people who are feeling this way don't feel empowered to seek outside help or encouragement from other people. What do you do, however, if you see one of your friends, neighbors, family members who are receding from society, becoming a loner themselves? What are some tools for people who know those kind of people?
Right, so there are a lot of people out there who you could categorize as loners, and in my private practice, one of the things that I ask people during their assessment, when I see them first, is how many people are you connected to? How many people do you see weekly that you talk to who know you're here? And that can be an important part of information. I find that there are a large number of people who tell me zero, as in they are disconnected from society. They are loners. Now keep in mind that not every shooter is a loner. Once again, there are complicated backgrounds. We can't say that every loner has the potential to be a shooter. Our brain is wired to connect to people, and we got to have people in our lives. And in many cases, some of these shooters are disenfranchised from society or are only connected to a couple of people. So we could call them loners. We have to think about how we raise our children and how we give them the skills that they need to connect with other people. So the responsibility belongs to all of us.
people that are joining us, if you want to give them a shout out, a little catch up on what we've been talking about.
Sure. If you're just joining us, my name is Bill Prasad. I'm KHOU's mental health and wellness expert. I'm here taking your questions about the 2 mass shootings. Some of the questions we've had are, what drives these individuals to commit these crimes? Who are they? What is their demographic information? And how do you talk to a child, a middle schooler, or a high school student? So if you have a question, we would love to hear from you.
You know, we were talking on loner and being a part of society. Sheila is talking about encouraging parents to be involved in their children's lives, and I know that that's such a critical part. Can you talk a little bit about why that is so important, and not just allowing them to, you got to have them their independence, but where's the line?
Right, Sheila was asking how important is it that parents stay connected, and what can happen when a parent isn't connected to a child. And that's exactly correct. A parent has to stay connected to a child and have ongoing conversations about how they're doing. I know that sometimes it's very difficult to get a teenager to talk to you. Some parents make the mistake that they ask a teenager question after question. Teenagers generally don't like that if you engage them in a conversation, that can be more effective. But yes, being a part of their lives, knowing their friends, knowing the parents of their friends is extremely important, because the caretakers, whether it's mom or dad, they are the models for our young people. Mom is the model for what it's like to be a woman in this society, and dad is a model for what it's like to be a man. The two together model what are successful and healthy relationships. So parental input is absolutely vital.
I know a lot of people have talked about, I know we touched on it earlier, but I don't think that there's any, too much can be too much. Fatigue, for people who are exposed to this. What are some solutions or some advice for people who are feeling this fatigue and don't know what to do?
So the question is, if people are feeling fatigue, is there mass shooter fatigue? And first of all, we have to understand that what we're seeing is horrendous. 2 mass shootings in less than 24 hours. It is horrible to watch. That we are all in this together, that you may want to limit your exposure to news media reports, that you have to remind yourself that there is a whole world out there, that there are ways that you can enjoy yourself, take care of yourself, whether it's getting good sleep, having a good diet, whatever that is that works for you. Some of the people I've spoken to in the last 10 to 15 hours have said they've gone to church. So that is something that my wife and I did on Sunday night. We went to church because we just felt compelled to do that on Sunday evening as opposed to Sunday morning, because we wanted that sense of unity, that we were in it together. It could be going to church, it could be reading, it could be meditation, it could be yoga, it could be working out. All of these things give us perspective. Sometimes it's taking a walk. Sometimes it's playing with a child, but we all have to remind ourselves that there is a completely different part of life that brings us joy. And right now, at times, based on what we've seen, finding joy, yes, can be difficult.
Bill? Hi, Lauren Tellerico here. If you can hear my voice, I think they just turned my mic on. But I saw somebody named Donald ask this, that he's afraid to go in public. He can't run for whatever reason. And that's something that we're seeing people commenting on social media since over the weekend, and anytime something like this happens. What is a normal reaction for somebody to have? Is it normal to feel anxious about going into a store or going into public or sending your children to school? Can you talk about what is normal and when somebody should try to get some help? When do they cross that line to really affecting their lives?
Sure. So it is absolutely normal after the days or hours following a mass shooting, in this case 2, to have a sense of what we call hypervigilance. That means you are on guard. Wherever you go, you might be more hypervigilant. But the new norm in our society is that no matter where you go, you should know where the exits are. So when I talked about going to church on Sunday night, one of the first things I looked around for was, what are the exits? Going to a movie, going out to dinner, you should have a sense of what the exits are. So if that continues beyond 30 days, that you are on edge, that you're feeling anxiety, that perhaps you're avoiding going out, these could be some signs that you need some additional help. But that sense of hypervigilance, even for the folks who were witnesses or were injured in these shootings, they will have that sense of hypervigilance over at least the next 30 days. The good part is that people are generally very resilient, that they do start to recovery around that 30-day period post the incident.
So if somebody is having, can you just list kind of, if somebody's never experienced anxiety or an anxiety attack or a panic attack, what kind of signs should they be looking for? What is a panic attack, or what is anxiety overall?
Panic attack first is an overwhelming sense that you are not safe and no one can help you. It is a real terrible feeling. And I work with patients who have panic attacks, and I remember I'm a scuba diver, and I hadn't scuba dived for a year and a half, and when I got back in the water, I started having a panic attack because it felt like I was in danger. And so panic attacks are real. Anxiety, all of us feel anxiety at times. There is no way to avoid all of anxiety. So anxiety affects people in a number of ways. Sometimes they feel their heart beating rapidly, sometimes they get sweaty palms, sometimes you get dry mouth, sometimes you get brain fog, sometimes you get an upset stomach. So there are a number of different symptoms that go with anxiety. Perhaps the defining moment in reference to whether you need help or not is your anxiety getting in the way of you being able to fulfill the various roles we have, such as being a mom, that is you, being a worker, being perhaps a son, a brother, a husband, a partner. If your anxiety is getting in the way of your ability to perform those roles, that's an indicator that you do need some additional help.
Can you tell people where they can get that help? Are there resources out there that won't cost them a lot of money, or even if it's, I guess, talking to a loved one, or if there are resources out there for people?
As far as resources, if you are working, there's a chance that your company has something called an employee assistance program. So under employee assistance program provisions, you get a certain number of meetings with a counselor, either face-to-face or on the phone, for free. So that's one of your first avenues. Can you take advantage of that? There can be community health centers where you can see someone at a reduced cost. Also, you can contact a therapist and use your medical insurance. You can ask the therapist if they accept a sliding scale, and essentially a sliding scale means the therapist will reduce their rates based on your income. Other avenues for getting help, sometimes meeting with a pastor, using your church. Sometimes church have support groups, group counseling for people who have anxiety, depression. So there are a lot of places. Sometimes it doesn't come down to, is mental health, are mental health services available? It comes down to, are you open to accepting those services? Are you able to say, I need some help?
Right, right. For you personally, this is what you do. You deal with people when they're having, anxiety, or when they're nervous, which I know is anxiety scared. Do you see an uptick in phone calls and people reaching out for help when you see these types of incidents, these mass shootings?
Yes, I do, and I work with a lot of patients who have had to deal with trauma, whether it was trauma of being a crime victim or a sexual assault or domestic violence survivor. This at times will trigger them, will bring some of those symptoms back up. So yes, some of the folks that I've worked with who I'm treating for trauma, they will have a reaction to what's going on, and they have to take care of themselves, and sometimes it's just not a good idea for them to submerge themselves in news media reports. They need to take a break.
I think, are you coming over here? 1 minute. Okay. Russ Luce is just getting ready to go on air.
Hey, Russ.
Prasad, so I'm going to just stop talking for a little bit.
So what are we up to?
Here's what I'm asking you. I'm going to say, we're talking right now, there's a package on 8chan. I'm going to say, how much does the internet and sites like 8chan, what kind of role do they really play in attacks like this?
Okay.
My second question is, it seems like a very difficult problem to tackle. I mean, you can't get rid of all the sites on all
Right.
the internet where violence is discussed and encouraged.
Right.
So that's two questions. I may follow up with something similar depending on what you say, since I don't know your answer. But the first one's going to be almost exactly what I just said. How does the internet, sites like 8chan, what kind of role do they play in attacks like this, where people congregate and collaborate?
So you're going to be on this.
What? Here?
It's all on movie, right? Yep. You're going to
Okay.
me.
And I'm just doing the tee. I'm done. After the tease, I'm done, right? After I tease, he'll be back? Okay, thank you. Yeah.
Stand by.
And our mental health expert, Bill Prasad, is back with us now. And let's talk about the internet and sites like 8chan. What kind of role do they play generally in attacks like these?
Sites like 8chan have turned into a microphone for some of these fringe elements. They encourage violence. If we take a look at 8chan, which I believe went dark early this morning, right? It is an online home for men who don't like women at times, fringe movements. It increases the chance that someone might become violent because they connect with something they're looking for. But if we go back even further, the question becomes, why did they go there in the first place? And we have to examine that.
Because let's be realistic. What can you really do about everything on the internet? And if you get rid of 8chan, and it's apparently gone for now, another one pops up immediately just like it, right?
Right, and our hands are somewhat tied with that. It's almost like saying, well, if we are going to get rid of drug addiction, the key is let's just eliminate all drugs. It just isn't that simple. So once again, it gets back to, why would people be attracted to these sites? What are the things that have occurred that have led them to go to this fringe element that espouses violence and hate?
All right, Bill, thanks very much. He's sticking around. We're going to come back in a few minutes. We're going to talk about how all this, the coverage, this kind of violence affects sometimes your mental health and what you can do about that. By the way, Bill is online with us right now on Facebook Live. If you have any questions in between our TV spots here, you can put it on our Facebook page and he'll get right to them. Back to you.
Okay.
Okay. I'm going to jump in here with you now, Bill.
All right.
I think this is on here. Hey, everybody. Are we on this camera? Yeah. Lauren Tallarico here, jumping in with Bill Prasad, who is talking about mental health and wellness, as well as any other questions that you have. We are on Facebook Live, so if you want to log on or tell your friends or family to log on and you have a question for Bill about yourself, about the shootings, about your children, how to deal with this, we want you to take this opportunity. This is some free advice you could get. And then every once in a while we're on TV too, so it's a little bit of behind the scenes you're seeing also here. So Russ and Reka might come over and then I'll step out and then he'll be live on KHOU 11 on air. But one of the things that I posted on my Twitter and Facebook, I asked people, 3 mass shootings in 1 week, has this changed the way that they operate? Do they look for exits when they go to stores now? Do they sit in the driveway or the parking lot a little bit longer now and think, oh gosh, do they have extra anxiety? Or does it not change how they operate at all? Do they think, you know, this is just kind of how we live nowadays and I'm not that worried? And so I've had some interesting responses, and some people say no, it hasn't really affected them. But one person said, what I thought was interesting, that they were at the gym, 6 men, sitting around in a locker room, and this is all people were talking about today, these shootings and what to do. What would you do? And I think maybe it's good to let people know that a lot of people might feel anxious or nervous, or is that normal? Do you see that a lot of people start talking about this and wondering what they should do or feel a little bit apprehensive?
It's definitely a normal response, and that is a response that we would have to what might be abnormal circumstances, but unfortunately we're seeing more and more of this. So going out and paying attention to where are the exits, looking around at any crowds and kind of scanning the crowd, all of those are natural responses. In fact, I've seen responses where people go to a restaurant and they want to be seated so they can see the exit. And we gravitated away from the days where if you go to the movies you don't need to pay attention to where the exits are. Most people, a lot of people will go in and you're there to enjoy the movie, but what you're doing is you're scanning, taking a look at where are the exits. And if you have a child, you're thinking, how would I get out with a child? What would I do? And now this has moved into a parking lot. The majority of these shootings take place in business places. So we all have to frequent businesses. We all have to go to work. We all have to go to stores. We all use parking lots. And that's the scary part about all of this.
At what point does that take a toll, or should you be paying attention to? It's normal to be aware. It's normal to have a little bit of apprehension sometimes. And you said that nowadays it's normal to know where the exits are. Those are things that might make you feel better. But at what point should somebody say, hey, this is beyond normal, or I'm really having anxiety when I go to sleep at night, or I am stopping my daily routine because I'm scared? What little signs should people look for to say, okay, I need to take this to the next level? This isn't normal. I'm really, it's taking a toll on me.
So some of the signs would be that you are having problems sleeping. Those sleep problems can come in several forms. It could be I can't fall asleep, I can't stay asleep, or I wake up several hours before I'm supposed to be up and now I can't get back to sleep. Other people, if they see long-term diet disruptions, appetite changes. So think of a person who can't sleep, hasn't been eating. So those are 2 key factors in saying, hey, I need some more help. What if they're not leaving the house anymore? What if when they leave the house and perhaps go to work, they're really irritable, they're not able to focus, not able to get their work done, maybe they're clashing with peers? So these are all things that will start to play out if they are feeling symptoms more than 30 days post-incident.
30 days.
Right, 30 days is kind of a line in the sand because you can't diagnose PTSD unless the incident it's been 30 days or more since the incident. In the first 30 days, you can diagnose something called acute stress disorder, but many of the symptoms that are connected to acute stress disorder are pretty normal reactions in the first 30 days following an incident.
Is it normal? So, of course, if you're a part of a tragedy like this, if you are there and you witness it, or you have a family member or friend and you have that personal connection, of course there's going to be extra anxiety and fear and trauma. But what about people who don't know anybody necessarily connected? Is it normal for us to feel sad, scared, feel like we've been I guess it's on every platform now, right? It's on TV, it's on you can't get away from it. I know as a mom, you try to kind of shield your children from that because my daughter's 2. I don't want her to know yet. So
it would be abnormal not to feel sad, not to be a bit frightened. We're all touched by this, and it keeps coming at us. And the more we see this at times, the more helpless we feel, the more frustrated we feel, the more we have a sense of something has to be done, but what is that something, or what are those some things? And a lot of folks that I've seen in television news reports, and maybe you've run into them, have said this has got to stop. What we all need to know is there isn't any one solution, that there are a number of things that have to occur to change this. It isn't just all about taking away guns. It isn't just all about taking away video games. There are myriad things that have to take place in order for us to get some traction to reduce the number of shootings.
And Bill, what about people who say they're indifferent? Like, gosh, it's just, again, over and over, and they zone out in a way. Is that a normal response?
That can be a protective factor.
Okay.
If I just act indifferently, I don't have to deal with what's happening. I don't have to get close to it. Maybe I'm afraid of some of my emotions. Some of that might be a reflection that perhaps there's prior trauma in their history, and this can be more difficult for someone who's already gone through their own personal trauma, maybe sexual assault, maybe domestic violence.
So something that we've heard and that you just brought up is video games. Also, this movies are more violent, and I'm not pinning anything on anything. I'm just saying what you hear all over the place all the time. Is it possible that people are being desensitized? You hear questions like that. Do video games make a difference when it comes to something so violent? Do the movies we're watching make a difference? Or does the movie? Do you see what I'm getting
Right.
at here? Is it?
The FBI took a look at that, and here's the statistic right here. 19% violent media use. So this is not a defining factor. There are many other factors, such as conflicts with friends, marital problems. There are other factors and behaviors that we see, but once again, how many people have never gotten into an argument with a friend? How many people have never gotten into a conflict with their spouse or partner? So it's very difficult to filter out any specific one behavior.
Gotcha. Okay. Russ Lewis is coming back over now. Is that right? I think. Okay. So this is live on Facebook, but it's also live on TV. So I'm going to step out.
Okay.
Russ Lewis is going to jump in and pick it up for KHOU
Okay.
11 on
Thank
air.
you.
But yeah, he's coming over soon.
We're still on Facebook. Hello, everybody. We're taking a quick break here because we're about to be on TV. So people may be wondering why we just went silent
Thanks
all
for
of a
coming
sudden.
over.
Yes, well, it's the least I could do. Thanks for being here. Seriously, coming down today and doing this for us, because
My pleasure.
it means a lot to people who have questions about how to handle this. We're going to talk about your mental health here on TV coming up in just a second.
Okay.
Thank you. And then it's a follow-up after that. I don't know what you're going to say, so I'm going to figure out something to do. Gotcha. You don't have an earpiece, do you?
I do not.
Okay. Man. In today's Health in Focus, we're taking a closer look at what these mass shootings do to our mental health, and Bill Prasad is back with us. Now, let's talk about that. People have been watching all weekend. They've been maybe talking about all this with their family or their kids. How do you recognize when you've just had enough? What changes in our behavior that maybe people can notice about themselves?
Sometimes people will become more jaded, more cynical. If you have a problem with depression, perhaps you feel even more down. If you've been diagnosed with anxiety, you'll have a sense of being nervous, a sense of your heart pounding faster. these are all indications that you're on overdose here, that you need to take a break from the continuing coverage. You can go back to it later, but a lot of us need a break from time to time.
How about people who have not been ever diagnosed with anxiety or just, but they've taken in so much of this? Can their behavior change? They get shorter with family members or coworkers. They start sniping at people. They're just more upset. More
Absolutely,
aggravated?
their level of irritation might increase. I've talked to some folks who had some trouble sleeping in the night before all of this happened. Their eating patterns might be affected. They might eat more or they might eat less. So all of us at times are susceptible to certain aspects of trauma, especially if it's right in our faces for a long period of time.
You have to be in tune with yourself, don't you? Because those are kind of subtle things.
Yes, you do. You have to be able to recognize things, and you also, if you're married, you have a partner, you've got to be able to recognize some changes in behavior, sleeping patterns, eating, irritability in the person you love.
Okay, take a break if it gets to be too much. We understand it gets to be too much for us sometimes too.
I
Reporting,
understand that.
Talking about this all the time. So Bill Prasad, thank you for coming in
You're
today.
welcome.
He's going to stay on Facebook Live here for a little while longer, answering your questions. For now, on the TV side, Reiko, we'll send it back to you.
Thank you. So if you're just joining us, we're streaming live from the KHOU newsroom talking about the mass shootings. There are some questions, Lauren, about who is the mass shooter. And it is more than likely 94% of them are men. Listen to this, 87% are either single, divorced, or separated. 63% are white, 56% showed characteristics that they may do this as much as 2 years before the attack.
Wow.
But at times, we only see pieces of behavior. Everyone sees a different piece, and at times, not everyone gets together to put all the pieces together.
Right. And I think most of us have met somebody where we think, oh, they rub us the wrong way, or they give us a weird feeling, and you think, ugh, I don't want to say anything. I'm just gonna. What signs should somebody be looking for? And maybe it's a colleague or it's someone at their school. You're talking to your child. They say they give me the heebie-jeebies. That's the best way I can put it, right? Sometimes you just meet somebody or you know somebody and you think, well, I don't know for sure, but something. You also don't want to kind of red flag everybody, right? Because we all know people that they're probably perfectly normal, but for us, we get a weird feeling, right? So what signs are real signs that something could be wrong? And then what do you do? Who do you tell?
Well, a very large number of them, more than 60%, have had a history of showing some type of abusive or bullying behavior.
Bullying others?
Bullying others, yes.
Okay.
About 35% have had criminal convictions, which tells us the majority of them didn't. So if we're looking for a trail of criminal convictions, we'll be disappointed.
Right. I think that's really important.
Yes. About 16% have been involved in intimate partner violence, and 11% have been accused of stalking. So there are some behaviors there that might give you some signals. If we take a look at what's happening at work or school, some indicators might be poor performance at work,
Right.
or poor performance at school. Some of these folks have had suicidal ideation. Some of them feel that they have very personal or political grievances, and they have this magic thinking about violence that somehow, if I commit this act, me or my group will get what they want.
Right.
And then a large number of them have something the FBI calls leakage, and that means that they have talked a little bit about what they would do in the time before they actually committed the act.
I just want to remind you that we're on Facebook Live, so if you have questions for Bill Prasad, this is the time to ask them. This is a free resource for you right now, whether it's about these mass shootings, the mental health aspect behind that, or if it's you personally. You're wondering how you should talk to your kids. Let's be honest. I mean, a lot of us have families. A lot of us don't exactly know what to say. Maybe we're shielding them from the TV. We're shielding them from the phones. They ask us a question and you don't really know what the right thing to say is. Because they're little, and
Right, and we do have to go to public places.
Right,
You-
right.
We can't
And you
just
don't want-
stay in the house.
So let me ask you this: what is normal? Is it normal? Should you tell your child, I'm nervous as a parent? You know, you try not to push things on your kids, but say you have to go to the store or you're sending them to school. School's just around the corner. Of course, you want to listen to their concerns, how they feel, but what should you tell them about how you're feeling?
Well, it's certainly a case-by-case basis, and a lot has to do with the age of the child. But what I always talk about is that a parent models coping skills. So saying, Mommy's a little nervous, here's what we're going to do. Daddy's a little nervous, here's what we're going to do, is not a bad thing. You as a woman are the model for your child as to what a woman is, and your husband models what a man is. And certainly we want to have the good modeling for our kids, and coping skills will be very important when they move from the littles up to the teenage ranks.
And also maybe I would just think to, and I'm not an expert, but to say, hey, this is, it's okay to be nervous a little bit. And like you said earlier, I don't know if you weren't watching, but if you were watching, but you said it's okay to say, hey, well, when you're home, you're safe. You're with us, we're gonna protect you. When you go to school or go somewhere else, your teachers are there to protect you, but you also say that you should know what the school is telling your children.
Right, you want the children to be connected and have an understanding that teachers are there to help them, security guards, officers are there to help them. You want to make sure your child is cooperating, and ask the child to walk you through, well, what would happen in school? Kids have been doing drills in schools for quite a while now, so it is not something new.
Let me just look, because we're on Facebook Live, people are asking questions, so let me just see. So let's see. You know, a lot of people saying, like Steven says, this is not for the most recent shootings. This is not a mental health issue. It's premeditated murder. Can you talk about that a little bit? At what point do we say this is not mental health for some of these, when these things happen all the time? This is somebody who wanted to do something very bad. We don't know. I'm just saying in general. They know what they were doing and they wanted to do it. What is the difference between mental health, having a mental health problem or issue, and then just being having an evil idea and wanting to see it carried out?
Right, so in the last 24 hours we've heard the words mental health, mental illness, crazy. All of those really aren't based in fact. When the FBI did a study, they found that 1 out of every 4 mass shooters either had a psychiatric diagnosis or had been hospitalized in a psychiatric hospital.
1 out of 4.
1 out of 4.
Only 1 out of 4.
Right, so 3 out of 4 didn't.
Right, okay.
So that tells you right out of the gate that blaming it on mental health really is not a good characterization. It is not accurate, because we'd think, well, if we locked up all the people who are mentally ill, we'd all be safe, and that would be ridiculous to think that.
Because, as you said, so FBI 1 out of 4.
Correct.
That's a big number, an interesting number
And
to look
also, if we use terms like mental illness in an irresponsible way, it stigmatizes people who have mental health challenges. It makes it harder for them to get help and ask for help.
Right.
And in reality, the numbers tell us that the mentally ill are more than likely to be a victim of a crime, not the perpetrator.
Bill, something I keep saying over and over again is people saying it's a breakdown of the family. That's why we're seeing all these mass shootings. That's why we're seeing all these horrific things. Can you speak to that a little bit? Do you see breakdowns of families, or are there things simply that people can do with their kids at home as they're raising them that would make a difference?
Yes, we really should look at this as a systemic problem. We really can't blame all the parents, we can't blame all the teachers, we can't blame all the legislators, but if we look at it as everyone has a piece of the pie, we could parent better. Mental health counselors could do a better job, and that includes me. educators can do a better job. Legislators can do a better job. If you put all those together, we might be able to get traction on this. But certainly a child's connection to his or her caretaker is extremely important, because once again, you are the model for what an adult is, what an adult is about. And if you get poor modeling, more than likely you will make poor choices.
And what does that mean? What does that mean to be a good parent? What are some things, because people watching might say, well, I think I'm a good parent, but I don't know. Or I think I'm a good teacher. I think I'm providing the care and concern for my students that I should, but what does that mean? Are there any guidelines to go by?
Well, if you have a teenager, one of the first things that you don't want to do is, your teenager is not your friend.
That's a hard one, I'm sure, for a lot of people.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Your teenager is not your girlfriend, your boyfriend, your buddy. You are the parent. Parents have to act like parents, adults in this relationship. And I see situations where there are dysfunctional families where the kids have been asked to act like adult and the parents act like children. That is a recipe for a major problem. And when we talk about dysfunctional families, we throw that term around that almost means nothing, but there are basic criteria for a dysfunctional family. This is a family that can't communicate. This is a family that can't do problem solving. This is a family that is inflexible. People change. We move to different areas. People get older. You have to have flexibility. And this is a family that can't maintain its roles. And I don't mean gender roles. It comes back to, once again, that parents have to be the adults in the relationship and the kids have to be allowed to be kids.
And I would imagine, does that mean making your children feel safe?
Yes.
Mentally, physically, loved?
Safe and loved. And one of the first things we try to teach our children is that they are safe with mommy and daddy, that this is a safe place. And if they don't learn that early, that's going to be a problem. And in reference to the tenets that I went through of a dysfunctional family, your first reaction might be, well, all families have those problems sometimes. And that would be right. Mm-hmm. But the dysfunctional family has those problems all of the time. So there's a sense of how something can go off the tracks and how you can tell if that's happening in your family.
What if you, for parents out there or teachers or anybody who's dealing with children, what if you do notice something that scares you a little bit and you think, well, I don't want to say anything because this is my child. I don't want to think the worst about them, or I don't want to think that they're capable of doing something scary or hurting themselves or us or friends. What that's got to be an incredibly difficult position to be in. What do you do?
Well, it's very difficult because your sense of parenting is kind of built around, I can take care of my child. I've done a good job. I can do it. Mm-hmm. And when it's clear your child needs some additional help, it can take a parent's breath away. It can be a hard decision to make. But to parent, you've got to make hard decisions.
And sometimes that means saying, I don't know what to do.
Yes, and then being the kind of parent or adult that will ask for help. So at times, I'll get a call from a parent who wants to come in and talk about sharpening their parenting skills. What can they do? Or I'll get a call from a mom or a dad saying and asking, what would I see, how would I know if my daughter has an eating disorder? So the parent has to be open to getting help.
Okay. Let's see, somebody wrote, well, do you think that a person, this is from Lena, do you think that a person who buys an automatic gun and kills human lives is normal? Of course not. And I just want to maybe talk about this a little bit. We say mental health issues. Well, they've never had a mental health issue before. I don't think by any means are we saying that that's a normal thing to do. But I think when we talk about mental health, it's difficult to sometimes prevent these things from happening if you're only going on mental health, because only 1 in 4 are described as having a mental health. Of course, it's not normal. So, and I don't know the right words here. We're live, so I'm just kind of talking to you at regular conversation. What's the difference between if someone's just is a psychopath the right word for something? I mean, when you're talking about somebody that wants to commit violence against somebody, if it's not a mental health issue, then what is it?
Well, I think legally, if you drill down, one of the litmus tests in a courtroom would be, did the person know the difference between right and wrong? if a defense attorney wants a jury to come back with insanity, but the person very clearly showed in the commission of the crime that they knew the difference between right or wrong, it's very difficult for a jury to come back with that kind of verdict.
And that's where that comes from.
That's one of the tests.
Okay. Well, our time is up here. Bill Prasad, thank you so much for being here
welcome.
with us today, and thank you for your questions. I know that this is obviously a very scary time for a lot of people when after something like this. It brings up a lot of questions for your kids, your family. And where are some resources quickly that people can go, or what should people do? Reach out to counselors at school. You can check through your health insurance to see if there's help. You said churches, right?
Right,
Or-
a church can be helpful, reaching out to your county services, that can help, reaching out to your employee assistance program, that can help. We're in this together, so we really have to take care of ourselves, especially if we're parents.
Right. Okay, we're going to wrap this up, but thanks for joining us. We will see you on air right now if you want to turn on the TV, and of course at 6 and then tonight at 10. Bill, thanks so much.
Thank you.